able to give a talk about new technologies and law. And I will, in the following 10 to 15 minutes, focus on one specific question that is raised by new developments of artificial intelligence in the context of criminal responsibility. Maybe I try to start with a little introduction on what is special about the development of artificial intelligence in the context of law. As we already know many new technologies that have not changed the legal system as much as AI seems to change it at the moment. And one problem, you can see this is how lawyers make pictures. One problem is, as you can see here, that AI is learning by itself, a broad definition of AI, and has basically unforeseeable, uncontrollable decision-making processes. So that means if we use AI in our everyday decision-making process, there is an element that the human beings that are involved cannot foresee and cannot fully control. That's a very short summary and a little bit superficial, but I hope it makes clear what the problem is that we are facing in the legal context here. And I also try to give you an example to make it hopefully even clearer. So an example from the medical context is we have a radiologist A who is choosing a specific diagnosis based on a suggestion of a program, and this program is using big data and some form of AI. The diagnosis proves itself wrong, and then that leads to the wrong therapy and finally bodily harm of the patient. The right diagnosis was not suggested by the program because the data that are fed were mostly wrong, and the reason for this cannot be found out ex post. Without the program, the radiologist might have found the right diagnosis, as it is part of her everyday practice. But because it was not suggested by the program, she did not think of it. And now we have to ask, who is responsible for the harm of the patient? And in general, or at first impression, we would say that the radiologist still is responsible. She's the one who is making the final decision, and we just have a tool that helps her with some suggestion, but it's not necessarily clear that that leads to less responsibility or no responsibility on her part. So we don't have a scenario where the machine is making the decision alone, but we have a scenario where a human being is making the decision using AI. So this is important. Still, I think already this leads to problems, not just when in the context of the machine making decisions by itself, but also and already here. We can look at different aspects. I really just want to focus on individual criminal responsibility because it is the strongest form of responsibility and the most problematic in the consequences of penal sanction. So, as you might know, individual criminal responsibility has certain criteria that have to be fulfilled, and we have different problems here, two main problems that I want to discuss a little bit. One is the question of causality that can be discussed in certain contexts. For example, if we ask if the programmer or a producer, if they have made mistake concerning the machine, can we prove that their mistake is causal for a specific result? But that is not the problem here. As I said, the human being still has made the final decision, and we can prove that that is causal for the result, for the bodily harm. So, but I think we have a problem here in the context of attribution. In German criminal law, the result has to be attributable to the person acting, and that would be radiologist A. And I think that if we use AI, this attribution becomes problematic because, as I said, there is a certain element of unforeseeable and uncontrollable part in the decision-making process. If you imagine that you have a machine that makes a suggestion of do this, do that, this diagnosis, and you don't know why this suggestion is made, it's really hard to decide against the machine psychologically. And it is also normatively problematic because you also know when you decide against the machine, this could lead to you being responsible. And you have to have good reasons to decide against the machine. But if you don't understand the machine, you don't understand the reasoning, how can you say I have good reasons to decide against it? So I think to say that in our example, the decision can still be attributed to radiologist A is problematic. Actually, maybe I just also want to mention this in the example. What is done here is to use a human being in the context of AI. This is normally called the human in the loop, in the decision-making loop. And in many cases, basically now this human in the loop is used as, in German we say something like Haftungsknecht. So they are used to be the final human being that we can still make responsible if it's adequate or not. And you see there seems to be a problem here. So I would argue that at least it's not easy to say A is still fully criminally responsible. So I hope you do agree so far. And I want to talk a little bit about what can we do, what are possible adaptations in criminal law. Well, basically, one could be just to say, well, we have less criminal responsibility in general. That could be a solution for the individual human beings involved. They at least are not responsible. But to have trust in a new technology, it is necessary to have someone who still is responsible if something goes wrong. And you also have to have people who feel responsible. So also there we have a problem if we just say no one is responsible. Well, basically this human in the loop is already what we see in our example. So we just make sure we always have human beings that make a decision, and we can basically take the responsibility concepts we have. This also, as I said, is a problem because it might not be very just towards the individual human beings involved. We could discuss collective criminal responsibility, but at least in German criminal law, so far we do not have these concepts, and maybe there are also good reasons why we don't have them yet. The same is can be said for responsibility of machines. At least in our legal system, this is not thinkable yet. Of course, we do have other kinds of legal responsibility like civil liability or administrative sanctions that are also important, and we should focus on them as well. But as I said, I think we still need individual criminal responsibility for society, but also that we have people that feel responsible for the decisions they are making. So therefore, an important aspect is to secure meaningful human control over the decision-making process we have. This debate of meaningful human control can be found especially in the ethics context of, okay, so we have meaningful human control, as I said, in the ethical context, and that means that we need, and also in the context of autonomous weapon systems, that the humans involved are not just used, so we have someone to make responsible, but they can really be seen as responsible, adequately responsible. And so they have to have some kind of control over the decision-making process. What does it mean? That depends a little bit on the context. So let's say on a very technical context, where a lot of math is required, let's say buying shares or something like that. It's not the same as in the context of autonomous weapon systems. So the human being has to be informed about how AI works, what are the reasons for the suggestions of AI and things like that. But how much he does have to understand or how much he does have to know, that might differ depending on the context in which AI is used. And also how we can secure it. For example, not a very good solution is to say, well, the AI does what it wants or makes the decision it wants to make, but we have a human being that just has to push a button if it thinks the decision is wrong. For example, in autonomous weapon systems, for example, the machine would say, I want to shoot, you have 3 seconds to say no and press a button. That would be overwhelming for a human being because it does not understand the situation. It has only a very short amount of time and it has to react very fast. That's not a good way to secure meaningful human control. But we have to have maybe more time. We have to have more knowledge for the human being. So meaningful human control could mean to inform the human being about what suggestions are possible, what solutions are possible, and let the human being choose. Other suggestions are that actually the human being is the first one making the decision, and the machine only reacts to the decision and says, maybe rethink that decision, are you sure? Things like that. The machine must be able to give reasons for its suggestions and so on. And sometimes it's even suggested that the machine still has to make mistakes every now and then, so programmed mistakes, so that the human being keeps awareness of what is happening and does not trust too much in the decisions of the machine. So this was a little introduction into the concept of meaningful human control and why I think it's important in the everyday decisions we will make in future in the context of AI. I also think that's a general note that we should keep meaningful human control over the process as such. So do we actually want AI? In which contexts do we want it? How do we want it? How do we ensure that it's a just and adequate AI? We should, as a society, really discuss how can we keep control over the development of AI. So, and with this, I want to thank you for your attention. These comics, of course, are in German. I'm sorry, I tried to translate a little bit. So we would have here a machine that is controlling the human being. This is not meaningful human control. Again, here the machines say they are forced by the law to also employ humans and have even to give them room for their breaks. Again, this might not be how we want our future working life to look like. Yeah, well, and with this, thank you very much for your attention.